There are truths that time cannot erase. There are loves that no distance can destroy. And there are men whose entire lives become a trial by fire, where each day is a battle between the heart and destiny. This is the story of James, a man born on arid land, forged beneath the unforgiving sun, who learned to tame wild horses before he could read his own name. A ranch hand who dreamed of something more than dust and sweat, who found love in the most unexpected place, in the eyes of a woman that fate forbade him to touch. But when that love was torn from his hands with the cruelty of lightning splitting a tree, when they separated him from the woman who carried in her womb the fruit of his blood, James did not surrender. He did not curse the heavens. He did not sink into bitterness. He did something few men have the courage to do. He turned his pain into purpose. He transformed every tear into strength. And for years, while competing in rodeos across the country, while his name became known in every town and every city, he kept in his chest the hope of a reunion that seemed impossible. What James didn't know is that destiny was writing a story much larger than his pain. A story where father and son would meet without recognizing each other, where they would compete face to face without knowing they shared the same blood, where love would demonstrate that neither time, nor distance, nor the injustice of men can destroy what is truly meant to be. Welcome to this story of life, of struggle, of unbreakable love. We invite you to stay with us until the end, to leave your opinion in the comments, and to share this lesson of hope with those who need it most. Because this story reminds us that when a man's heart is pure, when his love is true, destiny always finds the way back. Let this story begin. In the dry lands of West Texas, where the sun punishes without mercy and rain is a miracle awaited each year with desperation, James was born. His family had nothing but pride and work. His father was a ranch hand on someone else's property. His mother washed clothes for other families. They were poor but dignified. From his earliest memory, James lived among horses. The smell of leather, the dust raised by hooves, the sound of animals in the corrals, all of that was his world. By 6 years old, he was already riding with the skill of someone who had it in his blood. By 9, he was helping his father break colts that no one else dared to touch. But James had something that made him different. He didn't ride just out of necessity. He rode because he felt that on a horse, especially on a wild horse that no one had managed to control, he found his true nature. It was as if the animal and he understood each other in a language that didn't need words. When he turned 16, his father took him to a rodeo in the nearby town. It was the first time James saw men competing, risking their lives on fierce bulls, receiving applause and money for doing what he did every day out of simple necessity. That night, under the stars, he told his father that someday he too would compete, that he would prove that the sons of ranch hands could also reach glory. His father looked at him with those tired eyes that had seen too much poverty, too much rejection. He put his hand on his shoulder and said something James would never forget. "Son, chase your dream, but never forget who you are. The land saw you born, work made you a man. That's not shame, it's honor." James began training with an obsession that worried his mother. Every dawn, before the sun appeared, he was already in the corral. He rode the most difficult animals, fell again and again, got up with blood on his lips and kept trying. He had no trainer, no professional equipment, only hunger to prove his worth. At 19 years old, James enrolled in his first official competition. It was a modest rodeo in a city 2 days' ride away. He arrived on his horse with his patched hat and worn boots, carrying all the hope in the world in his chest. The other competitors looked at him with contempt. They saw a poor boy, with no name, no sponsors, no future. They made jokes about his old clothes, about his skinny horse. But when James's turn came and he rode that black bull that had thrown 3 riders before him, when he lasted the full 8 seconds with a technique that seemed impossible for someone so young, when he dismounted with elegance while the crowd roared in surprise, everyone knew they had witnessed the birth of a legend. He won 3rd place that day. It wasn't much money, but for his family it was a fortune. More importantly, his name began circulating among rodeo organizers. "There's a kid from the ranch," they said, "who rides as if the animals obey him out of respect, not fear." Over the next 2 years, James traveled from competition to competition. He won some, lost others, but always gave a show that people remembered. He sent every cent home, keeping only the minimum to eat and for the next trip. He slept where he could, sometimes in stables, sometimes under the stars. He didn't care. He was building something, he was proving something. Then came that Saturday that would change his life forever. It was an important rodeo in Austin. The prize was the biggest James had seen until then. The stands were full of well-dressed people, important families from the city. James was preparing behind the fences, focused as always, when he heard a voice. "Are you the one they call the ranch hand?" He turned and the world stopped. In front of him was a young woman of a beauty that took his breath away. She had chestnut hair pulled back with elegance, green eyes that shone with intelligence and curiosity, and a smile that illuminated everything around her. She wore expensive clothes. It was obvious she came from a well-off family. But there was no arrogance in her gaze, only genuine interest. "Yes," James managed to respond, feeling his voice sound strange. "That's what they call me." "I've heard about you," she said, approaching without fear of the smell of horse and dust that surrounded him. "They say you ride with your heart, not just with technique. I wanted to meet you before seeing you compete." She introduced herself as Elizabeth. She told him her family had land on the outskirts of the city, that she had grown up watching rodeos because her grandfather had been a rider in his youth. She spoke with a passion James recognized, the passion of someone who truly loves that world, not just comes to watch it for entertainment. They talked for barely a few minutes before they called James for his turn. But those minutes were enough for something to ignite in both their chests. Something neither of them fully understood, but both felt with the force of lightning. When James entered the arena, he saw Elizabeth in the east side stands. Their eyes met. She smiled and raised her hand in a gesture of encouragement. And for the first time in his life as a rider, James felt he was riding not just for himself, but to impress someone, to prove to that green-eyed woman that he was worthy of her attention. He rode the fiercest bull of the afternoon with a perfection that surprised even the most experienced judges. It wasn't just the regulation 8 seconds. It was the way he did it, with a grace and control that seemed supernatural. When he dismounted, the ovation was deafening. He won first place that day. But when he received the trophy and prize, his eyes searched for only one thing in the crowd: Elizabeth's smile. And when he found it, when he saw the pride shining in those green eyes, he knew he had won something much more valuable than any competition. After the competition, Elizabeth waited for him outside the corrals. James came out nervous, still with the dust and sweat of the competition. She didn't seem to care. She congratulated him with genuine joy, told him it had been the best ride she had seen in years. They walked through the streets of Austin that afternoon. Elizabeth showed him places he had never seen, beautiful squares, old buildings. James told her about his life on the ranch, about his family, about his dreams. He didn't try to impress her with lies, didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. He spoke to her with the honesty of someone who has nothing to hide. And as they walked, as they talked, both felt how their hearts opened to each other with an ease that frightened and excited at the same time. Elizabeth told him that her father, William Preston, was an important rancher, that he had inherited land and cattle from his own father, that he was a respected but also hard man with old-fashioned ideas. She told him she had grown up with privileges, yes, but also with heavy expectations on her shoulders. Her father had already chosen the man she should marry, the son of another rancher, someone from a good family, as he said. James felt a stab in his chest hearing that. How could he, a simple ranch hand without land or fortune, compete with that? But Elizabeth took his hand at that moment, with a bold gesture that surprised him, and told him something that would be etched in his soul. "I don't care what my father has decided. The heart doesn't obey conveniences. And my heart already made its decision when I saw you ride with that courage." From that day on, they saw each other every time James competed near Austin. They were secret meetings at first, being careful that Elizabeth's family wouldn't find out. They met in the plaza after nightfall, walked through secluded places, talked for hours about everything and nothing. The love between them grew fast and deep. James discovered that Elizabeth was not only beautiful, but also intelligent and kind. She had studied, knew about literature and music, but also loved riding horses, working with her hands, living close to nature. She was the perfect combination of education and connection to the land. Elizabeth discovered in James something no man from her social class had shown her. True humility, honest work, a pure heart that didn't seek her money but her company. James made her laugh with his ranch stories, made her feel alive with his passion for horses, made her feel loved with an intensity she had never known. 6 months passed of secret meetings. 6 months in which their love became so strong that both knew they couldn't live without each other. James worked harder than ever, winning competitions, saving every dollar. He dreamed of the day when he could present himself before William Preston as a man worthy of asking for his daughter's hand. One night, after winning another regional championship, James bought a simple silver ring. It wasn't much, but it was all he could afford. Under the stars, in a secluded place where they used to meet, he knelt before Elizabeth and asked her to be his wife. Elizabeth cried with joy and accepted without hesitation. She knew her father would oppose, but she was willing to fight for her love. They decided she would speak with William Preston, that she would explain how much she loved James, that she would ask for his blessing. James waited with his heart in his hand. Elizabeth was brave, she was intelligent. Surely she would find the right words to convince her father. But she was wrong. When Elizabeth spoke to her father about James, about their love, about their marriage plans, William Preston reacted with a fury she had never seen. The man flew into a rage, shouted that he would never allow his daughter to marry a ranch hand without land, without a name, without anything to offer but dust and poverty. That man only wants to take advantage of you, shouted William Preston. He wants our money, our position. A rodeo rider. A nobody who can't even read properly. Elizabeth tried to defend James, tried to explain that he was honorable, hard-working, that he truly loved her. But her father wouldn't listen. He strictly forbade her from seeing that man again. He locked her in the ranch, took away her horse, practically made her a prisoner. James, not hearing from Elizabeth for days, dared to go to the ranch. He needed to know what had happened. He needed to see her. But William Preston's workers, following the boss's orders, beat him and threw him out. They told him if he came back, they would turn him over to the police accusing him of attempted theft. The humiliation James felt that day was worse than any fall from a wild horse. They weren't rejecting him for being a bad man, not for being violent or dishonest. They were rejecting him simply for being poor, for having been born without privileges. The injustice burned his soul. For 2 weeks, he heard nothing from Elizabeth. 2 weeks of anguish, of sleepless nights, of days when he could barely eat. Then, one afternoon, he received a message through one of Elizabeth's friends. They had to meet that night in their usual place. It was urgent. James arrived with his heart galloping. When he saw Elizabeth emerge from the shadows, he immediately noticed something had changed. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, and her eyes showed a fear he had never seen in her. Elizabeth told him, with a broken voice, that she was pregnant, that she carried their child in her womb, and that her father had discovered the truth that very morning. "My father is furious," she said through tears. "He's sending me away, James, to a convent in the mountains where his sister is the Mother Superior. He says I'll give birth there in secret, that the baby will be given up for adoption, that afterward I'll return and marry whoever he chooses." James felt the world crumbling. He took Elizabeth's hands, desperate. "We'll run away," he said. "Right now. We'll go far where your father can't find us." But Elizabeth shook her head, crying, "My father has connections everywhere. He would find us. And what he would do to you. I can't let him hurt you. I don't care what he does to me." James shouted, "You can't leave. That's my child. You're my woman." Elizabeth kissed him desperately, as if she wanted to keep that moment for all eternity. Then she told him something that would break James's heart for years. "I love you more than my own life. But if we run away, my father will destroy you. He has the money and power to do it. I'd rather suffer alone than see you ruined or dead because of me. Go, James. Compete, win, make a name for yourself. Someday, when you're someone important, when you have enough money and reputation, come back. We'll find a way to be together. I promise you." James wanted to protest, wanted to fight, but he saw in Elizabeth's eyes a determination he couldn't break. She was trying to protect him, even though it cost her own happiness. They embraced in the darkness, both crying, knowing the dawn would separate them perhaps forever. The next day, before dawn, William Preston put Elizabeth in a wagon and sent her to the mountain convent. James tried to follow them, but was stopped by armed men that William Preston had hired specifically to keep him away. Beaten and defeated, James fell to his knees in the middle of the dusty road. For the first time since he was a child, he cried without control. He cried for the love they were tearing from him, for the child he would never know, for the injustice of a world that trampled the humble. For days he couldn't do anything. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, barely spoke. His parents watched him with concern, not knowing how to help him. His mother prepared food he didn't touch. His father tried to give him words of encouragement he didn't hear. But one night, lying under the stars he had so often shared with Elizabeth, James made a decision. He wasn't going to give up. He wasn't going to let William Preston win. He would do exactly what Elizabeth had asked. He would become someone important. He would earn enough money and reputation so that no William Preston in the world could despise him. And then he would return for her and their child. With that determination burning in his chest, James left his hometown. He threw himself fully into the rodeo circuit, traveling throughout Texas and even crossing into other states. He competed every weekend, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. His style became legendary, not just for his technique but for the almost desperate intensity with which he rode. He rides like he's running from something, some said, or chasing something, others said. They weren't wrong. James was chasing the dream of seeing Elizabeth again, of knowing his child. And he was fleeing from the pain that consumed him each night when he was alone. The years passed. 1, 2, 5, 10. James became one of the most recognized riders in the country. His name appeared on posters, in newspapers. He had accumulated a considerable fortune. He had fame, he had money, he had respect. But he still felt empty. He never got involved with another woman. There were those who tried to approach him, attracted by his fame or his appearance. But James rejected them politely. His heart belonged to Elizabeth, and although so many years had passed without seeing her, he couldn't imagine being with anyone else. Sometimes he tried to find out about her. He sent letters to the ranch that never received responses. He asked acquaintances from the area, but no one knew anything or no one wanted to tell him. William Preston had done his job well, keeping everything secret. 17 years passed. 17 years of competitions, of travels, of lonely nights. James had turned 36 years old. He was no longer the young boy full of dreams. He was a man weathered by life, with some scars from falls, with pain in his knees on cold mornings. But his heart still beat for the same woman, for the child he had never known. Then came the invitation that would change everything. It was a special competition in Austin, the city where he had met Elizabeth so many years ago. An important rodeo that would gather the best riders from several regions. The prize was generous, but that wasn't what attracted James. It was the possibility of returning to the place where it all began. The hope, however small, that maybe, somehow, he could get news of Elizabeth. James accepted the invitation. He arrived in Austin a week before the competition. The city had grown, had changed, but he could still recognize places where he had walked with Elizabeth. Every corner brought memories that hurt and healed at the same time. He discreetly asked about William Preston's ranch. They informed him that the old man had died 5 years earlier. James felt a mixture of emotions at that news. He had spent years hating that man, but he had also learned to forgive, because hatred only weighed on him. But if William Preston had died, where was Elizabeth? What had become of her? And their child? The day of the competition arrived. The arena was packed. There was a special atmosphere in the air, an energy James couldn't explain. While preparing behind the fences, he noticed there was another rider who was causing a sensation among the audience. He was a young man no more than 18 or 19 years old. Tall, strong build, with tan skin and dark eyes full of determination. He rode with surprising skill for someone so young. There was something about him, in his way of moving, in his technique, that seemed strangely familiar to James. The competition began. From the first rounds it was clear there were two riders who stood out above all. James, with his years of experience, and the young man, with his youth and natural talent. The audience was excited, shouting for both competitors. James noticed there was a woman in the stands who especially cheered for the young rider. From a distance he couldn't see her face well, but something about her caught his attention. Round after round, James and the young man remained tied. It was as if they were destined to compete against each other, as if the universe had orchestrated that confrontation. The final round arrived. Everything would be decided in the last rides. The young man went first. James watched him from the edge of the arena, and had to admit the boy was exceptional. He rode with a perfection few riders his age achieved. He completed the 8 seconds on a bull that had thrown 5 men that afternoon. The audience erupted in applause. The woman in the stands stood up shouting with joy. And at that moment, when she turned celebrating with those nearby, James could see her face clearly. Time stopped. It was Elizabeth. More mature, with some lines on her face that weren't there 17 years ago, but it was her. She was still beautiful, still had that light in her eyes he had loved from the first moment. James felt his legs trembling, that air wasn't reaching his lungs. All the noise of the crowd faded. He could only see those green eyes that had inhabited his dreams for 17 years. Now it was James's turn. He had to ride, he had to compete. But his mind was elsewhere. With trembling hands he approached the bull assigned to him, an enormous and aggressive animal. Just before giving the signal to open the gate, his eyes met Elizabeth's across the arena. She stared at him with eyes wide open, with an expression of absolute shock on her face. She had recognized him too. The years erased in that instant. They were again the young lovers who had separated with broken hearts. The pain of 17 years exploded between them like a silent lightning that only they could feel. James tried to concentrate, tried to focus on the ride. But it was impossible. He gave the signal almost by instinct. The gate opened. The bull came out with fury. But James wasn't really there. At 3 seconds, the animal made a sharp turn and James went flying, falling heavily on the sand. He got up immediately, more embarrassed than hurt. He had lost the competition. The young rider had won. But James didn't care about the trophy at that moment. He could only think about Elizabeth, that she was there, a few yards away, after so many years. He left the arena dazed. He headed to where he kept his equipment, needing a moment to process what had just happened. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Elizabeth was walking toward him. And beside her came the young rider, the boy who had just won the competition. James froze. Elizabeth stopped in front of him. She had tears in her eyes, but also a smile on her lips. A smile that mixed sadness, joy, pain, and hope, all at the same time. "James," she said, and her voice sounded exactly as he remembered it. "I knew someday this would happen. I knew someday we would meet." James wanted to say so many things, ask so many questions. But the words wouldn't come out. He could only look at her, confirm she was real, that it wasn't a dream. Elizabeth took the young man's hand beside her and brought him closer. The boy looked at James with intensity, with a mixture of curiosity and excitement in his dark eyes. "James," Elizabeth said with a voice broken by emotion, "I want to introduce you to someone. This is Michael. Your son." The words fell on James like lightning. He looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. And now he saw it clearly. The eyes were his, the shape of the jaw was his, even the way he stood with that discreet pride was exactly how he stood. "My son," James whispered, feeling his knees trembling. Michael stepped forward. He had tears in his eyes, but maintained composure. He extended his hand with a formal, respectful gesture. "All my life I've waited for this moment," the young man said with a firm but excited voice. "My mother has told me about you since I can remember. She told me you were the bravest and most honorable man she had ever known. She taught me to love you even though I didn't know you." James couldn't contain himself anymore. He ignored the extended hand and hugged his son for the first time in his life. The young man clung to him with the same intensity. Father and son, united after 17 years of forced separation, cried together in the middle of that arena that had so often witnessed courage, but never a moment as profoundly human as this. Elizabeth watched them with tears running down her cheeks. After so many years of pain, of nights crying for lost love and for the father her son didn't know, she finally saw her two loves together. When they finally separated, James took Michael's face in his hands. "Forgive me," he told him. "Forgive me for not being there. For not seeing you grow up, for not being there on your first day of school, on your birthdays, in every important moment of your life." Michael shook his head. "There's nothing to forgive. My mother explained everything. I know it wasn't your fault. I know we were separated unjustly. What matters is that now we're together." James turned to Elizabeth. The woman he had loved for 17 years was in front of him, no longer so young but even more beautiful for the strength she radiated, for having raised this extraordinary son alone. "Elizabeth," he said with a broken voice, "all these years, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped thinking about you, about our son. I competed in hundreds of rodeos, won championships, accumulated money, all thinking about the day I could return for you." Elizabeth approached and took his face in her hands, exactly as she had done the last night they were together 17 years ago. "I also loved you every day," she told him. "Every night I prayed to God asking him to take care of you, that someday he would allow us to be together again. When my father died, I returned here with Michael. I trained him myself, taught him everything I remembered from watching you ride. And he became a rider not just for love of rodeo, but because it was his way of connecting with you, of being part of your world even though he didn't know you." James listened with his heart broken and healed at the same time. He looked at Michael again, understanding now why the boy rode with that intensity, why there was something so familiar in his style. "I rode thinking of you," Michael confessed. "Every competition, every training, I imagined you were watching me from somewhere. I wanted to make you proud, even from a distance." The three of them moved away from the arena, looking for a more private place to talk. There was so much to say, so many years to recover. They sat in the empty stands as the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and purple. Elizabeth told James about the convent, about how she had given birth alone, with only the nuns to help her. She told him about her father, who never regretted what he did, who tried to force her to give Michael up for adoption but she flatly refused. She told him how she lived years practically a prisoner, until her father died and she could finally return. James told them about his travels, about the competitions, about the lonely nights where his only comfort was thinking about them. He told them how he had tried to find them, how he had sent letters that were never answered. Michael listened fascinated, finally knowing the complete story of his parents. He told them that although he had grown up without a father present, his mother had given him so much love that he never felt he lacked anything. But he admitted there had always been an emptiness, a question about the man who was his father. "Now that emptiness is filled," the young man said. "Now I know who you are, and you're better than I had imagined." James felt his heart exploding with emotion. He told Michael he was incredibly proud of him, not just as a rider but as a man. He thanked him for taking care of his mother all these years, for being strong when he couldn't be there. Then he turned to Elizabeth. 17 years ago I asked you to be my wife," he said. "And although everything changed, although so much time passed, my heart is still yours. Is there still room for me in your life?" Elizabeth cried again, but this time with pure happiness. "My heart never stopped being yours," she answered. "I've waited 17 years to hear those words again." They kissed while Michael watched them with an immense smile on his face. All his life he had dreamed of having a complete family, of seeing his mother happy, of knowing his father. And now, on this day that had begun as a simple rodeo competition, all his dreams had come true. Before anyone else said anything, if you wish to support this channel with a like, share this content with someone who needs to hear this story of hope, subscribe for more stories like this, or leave us in the comments if you've ever experienced a painful separation or an emotional reunion. Your stories also matter, and we'd love to read them. The following days were of endless conversations. James, Elizabeth, and Michael spent hours together, recovering lost time. James learned about Michael's friends, saw where he had grown up, learned every detail of the 17 years he had missed. Elizabeth showed him photographs she had jealously guarded. Michael as a baby, Michael taking his first steps, Michael at his first communion, Michael on his first ride. Each image was a dagger and a gift at the same time. Pain for what he couldn't live, but gratitude for being able to know it now. James proposed marriage to Elizabeth again, this time properly. He knelt before her and before Michael, asking not only to be her husband but also the father Michael deserved, even though he arrived late to that role. "You're not late," Michael told him. "You arrive at the exact moment we needed you." They married a month later in a simple but beautiful ceremony. Michael was the one who gave his mother away at the altar, walking proudly beside her. There was no grand celebration, they didn't need that. They only needed to be together, finally united as they should have been from the beginning. James decided to retire from professional competitions. He had pursued that world for 17 years trying to fill a void, trying to be worthy. But now that he had his family, he no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. With the money he had saved for years, they bought a modest but beautiful ranch. Not as large as William Preston's property, but it was theirs, built with honest work. There they began a new life together. Michael continued competing, but now with his father in the stands, advising him, celebrating his victories and consoling him in his defeats. The relationship between them grew stronger with each passing day. They weren't just father and son, but also friends, companions, confidants. James taught Michael not just about rodeo but about life. He talked to him about the importance of maintaining humility no matter how much success you have, about treating everyone with respect regardless of their social position, about valuing love above all material things. "Trophies rust, son," he would say. "Money runs out. But love, true love, that is eternal. Your mother and I are proof of that." Elizabeth watched her two men train together, talk, laugh, and felt her heart was finally at peace. She had suffered so much, had cried so many nights, but all that pain had been worth it to reach this moment of absolute fulfillment. One night, the three of them sat on the porch of their new house, watching the stars. James took Elizabeth's hand and Michael's, uniting them in a family circle. "I spent 17 years thinking they had taken the most valuable thing from me," James said. 17 years feeling that life had been unfair to me. But now I understand that all that pain had a purpose. It made me the man I am today. It taught me to value what truly matters. And it brought me back to you exactly when it should be." Elizabeth squeezed his hand. "Destiny has its own times," she said. "Sometimes we don't understand them, sometimes they seem cruel to us. But when everything finally fits together, we understand that each difficult moment was preparing us for something better." Michael looked at his parents and smiled. "And I learned that even though a father isn't physically present, if he's present in the heart, if his example inspires, then he's never truly absent. I grew up without you, Dad, but not without your influence. Mom made sure I always knew you were loved, that you were awaited." The three remained there late into the night, talking, laughing, crying, healing together the wounds of years of separation. This story teaches us that true love knows no limits of time or distance. That injustice can separate bodies but not hearts. That it's worth fighting for what we love, even if the battle lasts years. And that when love is pure and true, destiny always finds the way back. Never lose faith, never stop believing in the power of love.